Welcome to the Stop Ruining My Childhood podcast.
A sometimes nostalgic, sometimes cynical look back at pop culture.
Join us as we revisit movies, cartoons, and live-action TV of the 80s and 90s and ask the question,
does this hold up, or did I just ruin my childhood?
My name's Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And Wolfman's got nards.
Yes, that's true.
That's true.
We learned that in today's movie that we watched.
Yes, and so we are a little bit behind where we wanted to be, but we are talking today about Monster Squad.
Monster Squad from the 80s, 1986.
Yep.
And it was one of the movies I remembered from my childhood, so I wanted to revisit it. But before we get there, we have
our non-sponsored snack, which today is what I think of as a classic Halloween candy. Because we're still talking about Halloween, even though it's November. Mm-hmm. And that is the Tootsie Roll.
Yes, the Tootsie Roll.
Steve, the Tootsie Roll has been described as a chocolate-flavored taffy, but I don't think of it like taffy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like in between a caramel and a taffy, right? And the most interesting detail about this, in my opinion, is that the founder and the inventor of the Tootsie Roll, Leo Hirschfeld, Austrian Jewish immigrant to the U.S., and he was the son of an Austrian candy maker. So he started a small factory or shop in Brooklyn. And the first thing that he invented before he made the Tootsie Roll was called Bromogelin jelly powder.
Oh yeah, Bromogelin jelly powder. Yeah, that was a big hit with me as a kid.
It was a huge hit in the early 1900s before Jell-O.
Yeah,
and
that's what I remember it as.
It came out just a couple years before Jell-O, and then Jell-O kind of copied it and had better marketing.
So it died off.
It died off by the 1930s, yeah, because Jell-O just was outperforming it, basically. And by that point, Hirschfeld had passed, and so the company decided to focus more on other candy like the Tootsie Roll.
Okay.
And so the Tootsie Roll was invented in 1907. He named it after his daughter Clara, whose nickname was Tootsie.
Okay, that makes sense. So we could say Jell-O was responsible for the Tootsie Roll. Because if they hadn't put out his first idea, then maybe he wouldn't have focused on the Tootsie Roll.
It's possible, because the Bromogelin powder apparently was selling pretty well up till that point. And it wasn't just an unflavored gelatin. It did have flavors. So basically everything we learned at the Jell-O Museum was a lie.
Oh, that they designed completely.
Yeah.
Made it, yeah.
So Steve and I, a couple months ago, had the great pleasure of visiting the Jell-O Museum in Leroy, New York, which is a very, very small museum, but they talk about how they were the first flavored Jell-O powder, and the truth apparently is that is not true at all.
That's true, yeah. So, apparently they were not.
The mythology of Jell-O has been ruined.
Hirschfeld did it.
So, Tootsie Roll Industries, the name wasn't adopted until 1966, but according to the company website, the original recipe has basically a kind of graining process that continues to this day. So they're doing very similar process to what they did before. And it's sugar, corn syrup, palm oil, condensed milk, cocoa, whey, soy lectin, and then artificial flavors. What are your memories of Tootsie? Did you like Tootsie Rolls? Did you not as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, they were my favorite, but I ate Tootsie Rolls quite a bit. For some reason, you always ended up with a bunch of them on Halloween, because I feel like when people bought, like, mix bags, they were, like, filler.
Yeah, and you'd grab, like, a handful, or they'd say, take 3 pieces,
yeah.
And you'd just grab a
couple.
couple.
What I really liked was the Tootsie Roll, the big Tootsie Rolls.
The log.
With the segments that you could bite off.
Yeah.
I like those a little bit better, but this is the thing with Tootsie Roll. Like you said, they marketed themselves as like a chocolate toffee or something. But it doesn't taste like chocolate to me.
And that's the issue that I have. It tastes
like Tootsie Roll. Like, it's a very specific taste.
Yeah, that's the beef I have with Tootsie Roll, that it's not real chocolate, and it's not real taffy. It's like in the middle.
What I hear you say is you prefer that it were beef.
Beef?
Yeah, you said
No, the
I got a
beef I have.
Tootsie Roll.
Yeah, no, the beef Tootsie. A beef Tootsie Roll is just like a Slim Jim.
It's like a meat log. Ooh, a Slim Jim. I could go for a Slim Jim right now. It's a meat log.
The reason that I don't, so I'm not trying the Tootsie Roll today, and I'll tell you why. Because when I was about 3 years old, I got somehow, they had, you know how they have flavor lip gloss?
Mm-hmm.
And I got Tootsie Roll flavored lip gloss, and I thought that it would taste like the candy if I like bit into it, and I ate the lip gloss.
Yeah, I ate cherry lip gloss. I used to eat all the time as a little kid.
Oh my gosh,
it's just waxy.
It makes me so sickish, and now I can't even look at a Tootsie Roll. But also because, yeah, they're not real taffy, they're not real chocolate.
Coward.
Pick a side. Having said that, I could not find any for today, but I do enjoy a fruit chew Tootsie Roll.
Oh my goodness, yeah, those are good. The ones that are different flavor, like different fruit flavors.
And actually,
I love those.
If I recall correctly, I think I did find them and then I ate them.
Yeah, I love those.
Yeah, the vanilla, cherry.
When we were in Ohio a year and a half ago.
Yeah, the biggest candy store.
And we went to the biggest candy store. I got a bunch of just flavored ones.
The flavored ones, I had a neighbor who always had a Christmas party, and she would put out bowls of them. Big bowls. So I always think of that as like a Christmas candy.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird. But lemon, lime, vanilla, orange, cherry, and since then they've added green apple, blue raspberry, and grape. But those are like a Starburst, but not as tart.
Yep.
And that's why I like them.
I think of those as a summer candy.
Oh, interesting.
Because they're fruity.
Yeah, but I never had access to them in the summer.
And they're up my alley, because we already know how I feel about Skittles.
Yeah, that's true.
That's my jam.
And last fun fact about Tootsie Roll, this is the first penny candy in America to be individually wrapped.
Oh, nice.
So before you'd get like just butterscotches and stuff that weren't wrapped, and then and like horehound candy and things like that. Now they
we'll
wrap them.
this in some wax paper, and they never changed the type of paper.
Well, they had some issues, I guess, during World War II and getting boxes and wrapping and things like that. But eventually they worked all that out.
But it's interesting because the Tootsie Log or the Tootsie Roll Log or whatever it is, the bigger version is in like a cellophane wrapper. It's not in the same type.
Yeah, which is odd.
And usually cardboard is like around it.
Yeah.
Maybe because it's bigger and they don't want to get squished.
Maybe. But I don't. Why would you want to eat a Tootsie Roll Log if you don't even enjoy? So we always do 1 out of 5 for the snack.
Yeah.
1 out of 10 for the movie or TV show, and
we're doing amulets.
Amulets to tie into
Monster Squad.
Monster Squad. So
I have to give this 4 amulets.
Okay.
Because I do like Tootsie Rolls. They're not my favorite. They're
Really?
not a 5. They're not my favorite. But they're better than average, and I feel like 3 is average.
No, Tootsie Rolls for me are a solid 1. This is circus peanut territory. I'm not eating that.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
I'm not eating that Tootsie Roll in front of me.
I feel like you don't even know who I am.
I hate them so much. I don't think I've had a Tootsie Roll since I ate that stuff when I was
Yeah, so you probably don't even remember it.
All right. Well, hang on. We'll pause and I'll try. No.
I'll have the other piece.
Listen. I can't. I'm sorry. I cannot do it. Oh, I tried. It's like a weird... It tastes like chemicals. There's not really chemicals in it, but it just tastes like I can't. I'm sorry. I can't deal with it. Hang on a second. It's that fake chocolate flavor that's like not enough chocolate, and I don't like it. I don't like it. It's like, it tastes kind of like dirt and chemicals.
So I'm giving it a 4. You're giving it a 1. This might be the farthest apart we've ever been.
I think so. Oh, I feel so far.
There's
except candy cigarettes with Cheers.
There's a rift between us, and it's called Tootsie Roll.
Oh, I feel sad in my heart now. All right, so... Two and a half amulets. 2.5 amulets out of 5.
Yes.
So, really split on the Tootsie Roll, but we'll see how we feel about the movie.
Yeah.
So, Steve, can you give a summary, just a good overview of what is, for people who've never seen it, what is Monster Squad?
So, Monster Squad is, well, this is what I want to say. I want to say imagine the Goonies with monsters.
That's how I kind of felt about it.
Because that's kind of what it was around that same time period, and I feel like somebody who was writing scripts was like, we need a in-town kids adventure, but let's throw in classic monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a small group of kids who get together, and they realize that there are real monsters that have shown up in their town, and they have to fight them off and try to stop them. There's an amulet that these monsters are trying to get that will help basically... I think it basically lets them, like, take over the world.
Right, yeah.
Right, and allows evil to come back or something. And so the kids have to keep them away from the amulet, find it first, and kind of stop them. And so you have just you're like your original classic monsters, which is kind of nice. Dracula, Wolfman, the Mummy, Frankenstein, and the creature, they call it Gill Man, but the creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah, we're going to talk about why in a minute.
So that's that's basically the premise of this movie.
Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. And Goonies meets monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the history behind this movie is kind of interesting. It is considered a cult classic. It did not do well, its opening. And we're going to start with Fred Decker, who is the co-writer and director. And just a fun fact, he was rejected from several film schools.
Really?
And they allowed him into the school for USC, but they wouldn't allow him into the actual film department. So he just majored in English.
So he got into USC just to get in the film.
Haven't we all majored in English?
Yep.
So he was just annoyed and just wanted to make movies and hang out with his friends.
He did better than most English majors because at least he made a movie.
That's true. Neither of us has done that, but we do have this nice podcast. So before this movie, he did Night of the Creeps, and he co-wrote the Monster Squad with Shane Black. And he's got a little shout out to Monster Squad in Night of the Creeps. Night of the Creeps features alien parasites that get into people and basically turn them into zombies.
It's almost like Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, a little bit. I've never seen it, but I'd like to, having read a little bit more about it. And as Steve said, so they have Gill Man because they had some legal problems with Universal, because basically they wanted to use Universal classics and have kind of a takeoff on that.
Right.
And the thing is that there are some characters like Dracula and Frankenstein's monster that are from books that are in the public domain. So those characters, at least, are public domain, but also the look of them isn't. So it's kind of like when remakes have been done of The Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
And Dorothy's shoes have to be silver because that's how they were in the book. The ruby slippers are only in the Warner Brothers version from the 1930s.
Gotcha.
Right? So there are things like Universal's, Bela Lugosi had a deep widow's peak. Frankenstein's monster had bolts in its neck. So there's no widow's peak on the Dracula.
Mm-hmm.
There's the bolts. They moved up to the top of the Frankenstein's monster.
Yep.
To be at the top of his head instead of on the side. They tried to make the Wolfman character look different. So he's just he's a werewolf, but he's not specifically the universal werewolf.
Right.
And the same thing with the mummy, which could just be any mummy. And then they had, the only biggest problem was the creature of the Black Lagoon, which they had to call Gill Man.
Gill Man, yes.
Which is so stupid.
But it's pretty obvious. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, apparently, Ashley Bank, who is the little sister of the guy who's kind of in charge of the Monster Squad,
Yep.
Was actually afraid. She's got a couple scenes where she screams, and they would basically kind of try to stay in character and not be seen by the kids, when they weren't shooting the scenes, that they could get real reactions. Yep. And she's done interviews and she's like, oh no, all my screams are 100% real. I just think that's kind of funny. But my favorite fun fact about this is that I have two favorite fun facts, but I'll tell you the first one. I'm trying not to laugh. The first draft of this script this guy had only done one other movie,
Yeah.
right? And so he's a little unrealistic, and it featured, like, a scene set in the past with Van Helsing laying siege on Dracula's castle in a Zeppelin with machine guns.
Yes.
And 40 vampire brides riding horses. And the studio was like, if you shoot this, it will cost more than the entire movie would cost.
I feel like that makes it better.
I would watch the hell out of that movie.
Yeah.
Van Helsing hanging off a Zeppelin with a machine gun. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. My other favorite thing is that I watched the trailer, and this is how they started. Now, we just did the Real Ghostbusters, the cartoon, a little bit ago. The trailer goes, you know who to call when there's ghosts. But who you gonna call when there's monsters? Like, they're ripping off everybody.
Yeah.
They're ripping off everybody. I just thought that was so funny. Duncan Regiher? I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Okay. I'm so sorry, Duncan. If you're listening, I apologize for butchering your name.
I'm concerned that Duncan's listening.
But Liam Neeson was actually supposed to be in the role of Dracula. This around the time that he was doing the Lethal Weapon movies and stuff. After he had moved out of, like, the leading man singing roles of the 1960s. But Duncan beat him out. And eventually Wizard Magazine named him the best Dracula of all time, which I find interesting.
That is interesting.
Yeah, so those are just some fun facts about the making of the film. I think it's interesting that this is the same thing that we ran into when we talked about Hocus Pocus a couple weeks ago, Steve.
Yep.
That it didn't do well initially because it was released in the summer. So they have this classic monster, very Halloween movie. I mean, it's not Halloween time in the movie, but it's every classic Halloween monster.
Yeah. And it was in August. I said 86 earlier. It was an August 87 release.
Yeah. I just don't, why? I don't understand
that. Either make it a blockbuster like a July 4 thing.
Yeah.
Right, when you release your big guns, or do it in near Halloween.
I don't know why they would have made that decision, because it's not like now where they had VHS, but things at that period of time, they would take like a year to come out on VHS. If a movie studio did that today, I'd be like, oh, they're releasing it in August so that by Halloween it can be on streaming.
Yeah.
Right?
No, but that wasn't it. Yeah, you're right, because it released on VHS the next year.
Yeah.
And Laserdisc.
That's hilarious.
In 88. But
That's funny.
Maybe, you gotta kind of put your 80s mindset on. And I wonder if they wanted it to be sort of fall because of October, right? Because it is a monster movie. But they wanted to get it in August because it could be played at the drive-ins.
Yeah, and also, I forgot, too, that movies had a longer shelf life back then.
Yeah.
Like, now we have multiplexes where stuff comes in and out every week.
Yeah.
But back then, you would have, unless at the drive-in, where you might have a couple screens and you might have two movies playing at the same time, or three, and then they'd have, like, the second feature. But for the most part, like, we had, in 87, I think we had one movie theater that played one movie. But it would play it for a couple months.
Yeah.
And then eventually we had, maybe a year or two after that, the mall got a theater. And then by the time I worked there, I think there were 6 theaters at the mall. Like, right. 6 in that particular cinema. So, but I mean, I don't know. It's just, then release it at the end of September. It just seems odd to me, and I feel like it was kind of set up to fail. So we'll talk about that, though, when we get into reception, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So that is, we're gonna take a short break, and when we come back, we will get into our memories, or really lack thereof, and then we'll talk about our full review and recap.
Don't change that podcast channel.
Yeah, there's no ad this time, so...
Okay.
Don't change it in the 5 seconds. Bye. All right. Hope that break wasn't too long for you. I'm Megan.
And I'm Steve.
And we are talking about Monster Squad, a movie that I had never seen before I watched it for this show.
So tell me about your memories.
I had never even heard of this movie.
It's a travesty.
I know. It really kind of is. Yeah, no, I never heard of it. And it's weird because it falls into that, it's the right time frame. I mean, 1987, I would have been 6, but still you would have thought through VHS or through TV reruns. I've never heard of it. I've never seen it. That's it. That's all for my memories. How about you?
You would have been 8. You're trying to make yourself younger.
Hey. First of all, I just can't math. We talked about majoring in English, and this is what happens. All right. Yes, I would have been 8. Yeah, but my point is, right, that would have been the right time. Yeah. So
I was 10. That's how I know. I'm like, you weren't 6. I was 10. Like, there's not that much of a difference.
Well, I thought 1986, and then I got confused.
I was 10 at the time. Mm-hmm. And I watched this movie multiple times.
On Laserdisc?
I would like to say yes, but no. We did not have a Laserdisc player. But I may have seen it. Well, VHS would have been 88. I saw it newer than that. And this is how I think, I don't know if I saw it in the theaters. I think I saw it on HBO.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
If you remember back then, something would come out in theaters, then it would come out in HBO before VHS.
Yeah.
Right? So I watched this, like, numerous times on HBO or cable. And I was so impressed by this movie and bought into this 100% that I rounded up a group of my little friends in my neighborhood and we started a Monster Squad.
No.
Yes, and we would go around the neighborhood and patrol abandoned houses looking for monsters. I don't like your attitude and your ridicule right now. Monster Squad is a serious thing.
I'm not. That's so great.
Heads up to Timmy and Eddie. And there's a few other kids, but this was 35 years ago, so I don't remember. But we had a group, and we looked for monsters.
Listen,
I will even say we protected the neighborhood because no one was ever assaulted by monsters on our watch.
And you went into abandoned buildings?
Yeah, we sharpened some sticks into stakes. We had a kit like in a backpack. I don't like.
Oh my god!
This is a serious matter, and you're not taking it seriously.
I just want you to talk about this the whole hour. This is the best story, and I never knew it about you. Oh my god!
I saved it for the podcast because you always say save it for the podcast.
Listen, we dated for a year. We were engaged for a year. We've been married for over 5 years. Just over 5 years. 7 years I've known you, and I never knew this story until Steph. I'm sorry. I'm probably gonna have to edit all this. You guys, I am crying laughing right now. The picture of little Steve sharpening up some sticks to stake them into the heart of Dracula. Oh my god, I can't even take it.
And my neighbors had a tree house, and that was our headquarters.
Of course they did. Oh my god, this is so adorable.
Point, there was in Texas where I grew up, behind our houses, like where our back fences ended, there was what we used to call the bayou. It's not a bayou, but Texas, they have these long irrigation trenches.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That are concrete. They're almost, they look kind of like, when they always show you in movies like in Greece and stuff in LA.
Yeah, they drive.
They're like that, but smaller.
Yeah.
But they're still probably, I would say they're probably 30 feet across. Mm-hmm. And, and then when they fill with water, you've probably got, I don't know.
You have a moat.
3 feet of water that's probably 15, 20 feet across. Almost like a creek.
Okay.
But it's in kind of a concrete basin,
yeah,
right?
I gotcha.
So we built a boat.
You built a boat?
Yes, because how could we look for
Oh my god.
How can we look for the Gill Monster, Megan, if you don't have a boat?
I don't know.
It's like you don't even think about Monster Squad.
Well, because, listen, I didn't really have friends as a kid. So, all this stuff is things that I would never have done. You know what I mean?
Oh, okay. That's sad.
But not really. Yeah, it is. But
that's sad, but don't hijack my Monster Squad
I'm
story.
not. You built a boat.
Yeah.
We
had a headquarters.
To look for Gill Man. This was pretty legit.
Yeah, and there was a number of, we were in a cul-de-sac.
Mm-hmm.
And right at the end of at the entrance of the cul-de-sac where the cross streets met, there was an empty house on the corner. We patrolled that house regularly. We were able to get in through one of the back windows.
Okay.
And there was a few others on nearer streets that we checked out because, as you know from the movie, abandoned old house is where the monsters are going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's true. That's facts. And then you also have a boat and you have a headquarter.
To me, this is actually pretty impressive. All right,
organization
for a 10-year-old.
It is. And did the boat float?
Yeah, it was more like a raft.
A little raft?
But yeah, it floated.
You Tom Sawyer it up.
You had to watch out for water moccasins, water snakes, because they were in there.
That's how the Gill Man gets you.
That's how, we were looking for monsters and there was real threats.
Real threats. So how did this end? Because you moved, or?
I don't recall. It might have just been one of those things where, I'd like to say we destroyed all the monsters and there wasn't a need for the monster squad anymore, but realistically, most likely we got into something different.
Mm-hmm.
Or we
He-Man takes over or something.
Yeah,
like
we
that.
got into something, another game, or we switched our club around. It was the same group of kids, and we all just did new things together, But yeah, we probably within a year and a half is when I moved away.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't do Monster Squad for that long, if I recall. So I think we just kind of grew into something different, as kids do. But it was pretty legit. I remember just having our backpack and our equipment, and I had my little Monster Squad. I had a little camouflage muscle shirt.
Oh my gosh.
In black parachute pants with the zippers all over them.
I love you so much. I can't take it. I can't take it. This is the best story I've ever heard. Oh my word. All right.
Yeah, that's my memories of Monster Squad.
I can't. Oh my goodness.
You're welcome, audience.
I should say, too, I didn't even see Goonies at this age either, so it's possible that this is just one of those things that my parents just thought that I was... I have big imagination, so probably they might have thought that it would have been too scary for me.
You're going to say you get afraid, but Megan, you still get afraid. We can't watch scary movies past dark. I'm
going to edit that out. You can't be telling those kind of secrets on the podcast. I will watch scary movies, especially around Halloween time, but not if it's after dark. And one time I watched Twin Peaks by myself, in the cold of February, and it was after dark, and I couldn't, this is I've seen the show before. This is a year or two ago,
mm-hmm.
and you were out of town, and I straight up just didn't sleep the whole night. I was No, I can't deal with it. It's too creepy.
I think that my Monster Squad time, I think it was right, because this came out in August, it would have been that winter. Because, it gets darker earlier in the winter, so you can go patrol for monsters.
That's true.
And it's not dinner time yet.
All right.
And I was in Texas where it's 65 or 70 in the winter still.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so let's get into the full movie.
Yes, the full rundown of the Monster Squad.
The full rundown that inspired a young Stephen Hall to take up arms against the monsters, not water moccasins, but the other monsters in his small neighborhood.
So we open with an intro scroll
mm-hmm.
that tells us that Van Helsing and a group of monster hunters tried to stop evil 100 years ago, but failed.
Yeah, they failed, which made me laugh right off the bat.
And it shows them, then it gives us a little flashback of them attacking the monsters. There's the amulet that becomes a big piece of the movie later, which opens a black hole and sucks all of them into the black hole. Van Helsing, a bunch of the brides of Dracula, some extra monsters that were in the fight, and his guys all kind of get sucked into this black hole.
Yeah, what did you think at the beginning? Seeing it back so many years later.
It's alright.
Yeah, it's interesting that they don't start with the kids.
Yeah, I guess they're trying to... I think that, to be honest, I think they could have just done the scroll.
Yeah, I think so too. And I also, but given what they wanted to do with the Zeppelins and the machine guns.
That's true.
But I think the scroll is a lot like Star Wars. So there, again, this is a movie that's very referential of other movies.
Yes.
And it's interesting to me in that way. So then we come on to the present day, 1980.
Yep. Sean and Patrick we meet, who are two of the Monster Squad. Sean's like the main guy, and Patrick's his buddy.
Mm-hmm.
And they're getting lectured by a science teacher, and they call him a couple not appropriate words for gay people.
So this is the first thing that surprised me about this movie, that, you know, when you rewatch the Goonies, it feels like this movie a little bit. Like, they have sort of the same feel, which is why one of the reasons it's interesting to me that this one didn't kind of take off.
Yeah.
Yeah. But these kids are way, I don't know if they tried to just be like, hey, we want to make them more realistic, or like they swear and they smoke and they pass around dirty magazines.
Yep.
Yeah. They're a lot more, I don't know. They're a lot more, I guess, maybe they're more like 13-year-old boys are. I don't know.
Yeah. And they kind of make fun of the teacher. They call, of course, they say a few things about him, questioning his sexuality. They call, like, one of the English teacher, like, cat lady, because her hair is kind of designed like cat ears a little bit. So, you know, you have that intro to them that they're supposed to be average kids. They're kind of in trouble, but it's not a big deal. You know, so they're not goody two-shoes kids, but they're also not, like, you know, big troublemakers. And you get that, too, because then we're introduced to two more members of the group. We get Rudy, who's the cool kid. Mm-hmm. He's a little bit older than them.
Yeah, and he's not quite part of the squad, but Sean wants him to be part of the squad.
Yes, and they made some interesting choices with Rudy.
Yeah.
Because Rudy, we can tell he's the cool kid because he's wearing a T-Bird style jacket.
Yeah.
And his hair is kind of done grease style, right?
Yeah.
Like a greaser. But then he's riding a bicycle with a banana
Well, I mean, as you would back then.
BMXs were there. I mean, we did
true.
rad.
Yeah, we did do rad. Yeah, the thing with Rudy that's interesting to me, and I had that in my notes, that, you know, kind of, it reminded me a bit of Stranger Things, where they have, you know, we have a show now that harkens to the 80s, that some of the things in this harken back to the 50s. And he seems much more of like a 50s, what's that one where they say, stay golden, pony boy?
The Outsiders.
The Outsiders. He looks like a kid from The Outsiders. Yeah.
But we are introduced to him as he saves Horace, who they call the fat kid, and he is the fat member. But they call him the fat kid, and he saves Horace from some bullies. Mm-hmm. So the thing we get to know about Rudy is he's the tough kid, the cool guy, but he has a heart.
Yeah, he has a good heart.
So he acts tough, but on the inside, he does the right thing, Megan.
Yeah, and the dynamics here also reminded me a little bit of Stand By Me.
Yeah, very much so.
With having, like, the group dynamic
yes.
of, like, the cool kid and the kind of nerdy kid who's leading everybody, and then the kid who's a little bit chubbier, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So...
We also meet Sean's little sister, Phoebe.
Yes.
Who's kind of part of a junior member of the Monster.
And they have a thing about no girls, but then she basically cries to her mom.
Yes, it gets allowed.
She gets allowed.
And there's one more kid who magically appears during the movie that we're never really introduced to, but he has a dog that's really cute. He has a little beagle who gets a lot more screen time than he does.
Yeah, I wondered about that, and when I was doing the research about it later, I found there's about 13 minutes or so that were cut because they wanted to get this under 90 minutes.
Okay.
So they might have him in other scenes or introduce him.
And then they cut it out.
And then they cut it out. Because it seems he's a little kid, right?
Yeah.
The little kid, yeah.
He's the younger of the boys. And all of a sudden he's just there.
Yeah.
In the treehouse.
With the dog.
And I noticed the dog first. And I'm like, oh, the dog. And then the dog sits on his lap. And I was like, who the heck is this kid?
Yeah. We haven't really been formally introduced to him.
Right.
But at any rate. So they're, so that's the Monster Squad.
Yeah, that's the Monster Squad. that we're introduced to right off the bat. So then it flips to a cargo plane.
Yes.
And this cargo plane has two pilots who are complaining that they have to fly this plane full of just dead people. It's a bunch of coffins.
And then one of them starts moving.
Yeah, it does. Who do you think it is?
Gill Man.
No, it's Dracula.
I'm just kidding. It's Dracula. Yeah,
Dracula appears and kind of kills one of the guys, I think, and basically drops out these coffins, which I think it's Gill Man, the Mummy, him, and Frankenstein.
Yeah, so it's everybody except the Wolfman.
Right.
And then he becomes a bat.
Yeah, he just becomes a bat and drops out of the plane.
Drops out of the plane. And then basically has to round up all of his team. His squad.
The real monster squad, if you would.
Yeah. In the meantime, the preteens get a hold of the diary.
Yes, they find Van Helsing's diary, which is written in German, so none of them can read
They're
it.
very excited about it, and then they open it up and they realize that it's in German.
Yes.
Which I just thought was so funny because, you know, again, we mentioned Goonies, but, like, it's not One-Eyed Willie's map where, like, it tells you everything, like, in perfect English, right? So that was kind of a nice touch there.
Yeah, and so we find them, they're talking about that and talking about monsters in the clubhouse as Rudy is looking through a window from the treehouse at Patrick's older sister.
Yeah, again, this is a kind of, to me, a little bit of a surprising detail. And I guess maybe it is how guys would act. But are guys going to act like that? Even Rudy, who's supposed to be cool, and he's a little bit older. But the really little kid is there with his dog, and then the little girl is there too. Like, are you going to be?
But none of them are doing that. It's just Rudy. And
no,
it's
none of them are doing
it's
that.
It's not
but
like they realize. Well, some of the boys know what he's doing, but most of them aren't.
Yeah,
like,
and he's kind of like commenting on it and watching her while the others are having this meeting.
Yes. Yeah. You know what's hilarious is, as a 10-year-old, I don't remember this part. Like, that didn't stand out to me because I was 10, you know. So
yeah.
I'm prepubescent, and so that's not something that was hidden. That's not something I assumed was cool about the movie.
Right. That is the kind of detail that would make my parents not allow me to watch the film.
Yeah.
Although, Surprisingly, I saw Back to the Future in theaters. But
we also have a few cutaways where we do meet the Wolfman, who is just a normal guy that lives in town, but he is a werewolf. And the police, he basically tells the police, lock me up because the moon's coming out.
Yeah, and they think
they don't believe
No,
him.
they think he's nuts.
Yeah, and then he turns into a werewolf.
Which is also kind of cool because then you can see, like, in terms of the monsters, this is somebody who, at least at his core and heart, he wants to be a good guy. He doesn't want to hurt people. But unfortunately, they're like, get the heck out of here.
Dracula finds his people, and he finds his people and he goes to a hill that overlooks the town and says, let it begin, in a very deep, evil voice. I remember that voice in case I heard it and I had to do away with Dracula.
I mean, you gotta get your stakes out. And that's the voice that won him the Wizarding Magazine's Best Dracula.
That's right. Dracula brings all his monsters to the house, where he has like this kind of like this old mansion.
Yeah. This house is a perfect creepy haunted house.
It is. And then he goes down the basement where there's a dungeon, and he senses, I guess, the amulet has been like buried in the walls. Mm-hmm. But I wrote in my notes, why is there a house with a secret dungeon in America?
Yeah. Because the amulet.
Because, like, when Van Helsing fought him 100 years ago, it was sort of implied it was in Europe. It was, like, in Transylvania.
Yeah, they're in Transylvania.
Right.
Hence the diary being in German as well, right?
Right.
Yeah. But they're now in the U.S. and in Middle America.
Yeah.
Apparently houses have dungeons.
It's supposed to be, I guess, the house, I guess, supposed to belong to Van Helsing's, like his offspring. Yeah,
and you could even be like, oh, well, maybe it was, like... This is a suburban home.
Yeah.
And it's old, but it's not like pre-Civil War old.
I get why like the diary ends up there and the amulet, because Van Helsing's descendants take them to America to protect them, right? But you get to America and you build a house. Why do you think, let's put dungeon in? You know what I would have bought more, and this is a writing choice, I guess, a bomb shelter. Because that was big in America in the 50s, the 60s.
Yeah, but the house looks like it's been in a state of disrepair for at least 20 years. But you could have a bomb shelter from like the 30s even.
Right.
And that kind of thing. So then Dracula is like, they need the diary.
Yep.
Because the diary basically tells them then how to unlock the amulet.
Yeah, it has like an incantation that has to be read.
Right. So he sends Frankenstein's monster out to get it.
We have the scene where Frankenstein's monster comes up on a pond and finds Phoebe, the youngest junior member of the Monster Squad, sitting by the pond.
And now what's fascinating about this is we just talked about a very similar scene in Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah, but both of these emulate
the original
Frankenstein, right?
The
Except
movie.
He kills the girl, right?
Yeah, he kills the kid in that. Well, and he did in Buffy too.
Right.
But here, sorry, spoilers for
Spoilers.
spoilers for last week's episode if you haven't listened to it yet. But here, we have her scream, which apparently was very real, and then they cut back later to them.
Buffy's scene with Adam and the kid is like an homage. This is almost shot for shot.
Yeah, it really is.
To the original Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
and that's definitely the director loving horror movies.
And so you're left to be like, oh my God, what do you do? And then we find out that Frankenstein and Phoebe are best friends now.
Oh yeah, they're best friend times.
Along with the dog.
Yeah.
Who gets way more film time than the kid that was with the dog.
Yeah, I think that little kid was supposed to be Phoebe's friend. I think that's how he ended up there.
That makes sense.
Like, he's next door and he's Phoebe's friend.
Yeah.
And then she brought him into the Monster Squad. But, yeah, so they're best friends now. And Frankenstein's monster, who really didn't want to help Dracula and was kind of reluctant, now he's kind of on their side.
Right.
So in the meantime, the kids also, while all this is going on, they're trying to read the German.
Yep.
And there's this creepy old man who also lives in kind of a crumbling house. And they're afraid. But they keep debating. Should we go talk to him or should we not?
But they know he speaks German.
Yeah.
So they end up going and asking. And he ends up being a really nice old man. He brings them in, he gives them soda, and he gives them treats, and he tells them all about what the book says.
Yeah, he just reads the book to them and gives them some cookies.
Yeah, he doesn't judge that they're, like, trying to find monsters.
And then they say to him, it sounds like you really understand evil, and he's like, you have no idea. And then we in the audience see that he has a tattoo from his...
Yeah.
And he's a survivor of the concentration
camp. He
camp.
closes the door, and as he does, you see on his arm that he has a tattoo from the Holocaust.
And it's a really solemn moment in this movie, but again, if you were a kid, you might not really know what that meant.
I wouldn't have caught that at 10, probably.
Yeah.
But it really was, So that was interesting.
And I also thought it was a good directorial choice to not explain that, to just have him say, you have no idea, and we see it. So if you're an adult, you know, and if you're a kid, you don't have to be exposed to the real.
It was surprising that that's in this movie. It's kind of a jovial, sort of scary, but kid adventure, and that's kind of a more solemn, serious point.
Yeah.
Again, to just have it's like a throwaway scene. Mm-hmm. You know, it's not followed up on.
No,
but it was interesting.
Yeah, and I liked this character. This is kind of a trope that we see in some kids' movies of this time of, like, somebody that you're afraid of, like Home Alone has a similar character. Somebody who's an older person that you're afraid of, and then you realize that they're okay. So, then we come to a part that also reminded me of Hocus Pocus, and that is the discussion of the need for a virgin.
I thought you were going to say Bette Midler's solo.
No, yeah, and then Bette Midler comes out and sings a song. She sings Beaches, or whatever. Would that be around the same time?
Wind Beneath My Wings.
That's right. The movie's name is Beaches, Wind Beneath My Wings. Yeah, so we have, again, the older sister that Rudy was spying on.
Yes. Yep.
Before it's Sean's sister,
supposed to be
right?
a hottie.
Yeah.
It's Patrick's sister.
Patrick's sister, sorry.
Yep.
And they're like, we need a virgin. Is your sister a virgin? Aren't all of you virgins?
She's like 15 or 16. She's not, so she probably,
yeah.
But they basically are like awkwardly trying to ask her.
Yeah, that part I did find funny.
Yeah, and then so they get her on the team.
Yeah, so basically she says that she's a virgin, or at least claims to be.
Mm-hmm.
And she's now on their team, and they're going to read this incantation so that they can have the amulet instead of Dracula and the henchmen who are still with him.
Yes.
In the meantime, the poor werewolf. The poor werewolf just wants to be a person.
Well, it's tough because during the day, Dracula ties him up because during the day when he's a human, he doesn't want anything to do with this. But when he turns into a wolf, he's under Dracula's control.
Yeah. So midnight's approaching, and the monster squad makes their way to the church for their last stand.
Yes.
They're going to get the amulet by reading this incantation. And in the meantime, Sean's father is a police detective. Which, that's one of the things, too, that Sean's been picking up some of these clues about monsters by listening in on his dad's, like, work stuff.
Yes, yep. And so the kids go to the house and they steal the amulet. And on the way to the church, the mummy grabs a hold of the back of the car.
Yes, I forgot about that part.
And one of the kids, I think it's Patrick, takes out his bow and arrow because just like my real life monster squad, this fake monster squad has made weapons for themselves.
Oh yeah, they're prepared.
Patrick pulls out a bow and arrow and he takes a piece of the mummy's wrapping and fires it to a tree, and then it unwraps the entire mummy off the back of the car, which is pretty ingenious.
Yeah,
actually.
that was a pretty funny bit. So the cathedral doors are locked, and they have to read this incantation outside. So Lisa starts reading it, and then it doesn't work because she's like, "Well, it was just that one time, and it was kind of like he started."
She said like Zach doesn't count.
Yeah.
And we're like, no, Lisa, you can't just decide that.
Yeah. Oh my word. I don't understand what's up with people in the late 80s, early 90s being obsessed with the virginity of children, essentially.
So now they have Dracula,
yeah,
Wolfman, and the creature from the Black Lagoon, like, in their face attacking them at the church in the middle of town, and Lisa has just ruined their entire ceremony.
Yes.
By lying about her purity.
Now, thankfully, Phoebe's there.
Yeah, the old man who's come to help them goes, well, we have one still, and grabs Phoebe. Yeah, Phoebe's like 7, so hopefully she counts.
Yeah. Now, I should say, too, that they had a little girl reading this incantation in the first scene as well. So they bring in Phoebe, but also all the boys are virgins too. Like, you don't
I thought of that. They didn't say it had to be a girl.
No, which is the joke of Hocus Pocus, that it's a boy that lights the candle.
That's kind of sexist.
Yeah, it's super sexist.
Because my guess is like all the boys in the Monster Squad are.
If they weren't, would Rudy be looking at Lisa through the telescope? No,
probably still, but
no. He would be on dates, Steve. They don't have. That's why that's like you and your friends. That's why they have the treehouse with no girls allowed. They're not at that point yet. Yeah. So at any rate, the German guy helps Phoebe read. Dracula, the Mummy, Gill Man.
No, Mummy's gone. Remember?
Oh, Mummy's already gone. But the Gill Man and the Wolfman are defeated. Well, Wolfman wasn't really up for it to begin with.
Yeah, he actually turns into a human and says thank you.
Yeah. Dracula arrives. He's going to try to destroy the amulet, and then Frankenstein's monster saves the day.
Yeah, well, because of course, Phoebe has the amulet because she's reading, and Dracula goes to attack Phoebe, and Frankenstein's monster is like, we're not having that because that's
his
my best friend.
Yeah, it's his best friend.
Grabs Dracula by the throat and picks him up like 2 feet off the ground.
Yeah. He gets him with a wrought iron cross. Phoebe finishes the incantation. The portal opens! The bodies of the monsters go, and Dracula tries to drag Sean in with him. But, just like your Monster Squad, what does Sean have?
He's got a stake.
He sure enough does.
And he stakes Dracula.
Yep. He stakes him, and Patrick grabs Sean. Another best friend save. It's just a movie about friendships.
And Frankenstein gets sucked into the portal, too.
Which is sad.
Because he's a monster. But Phoebe gives him her teddy bear.
And then Van Helsing comes back.
Yeah, and does a thumbs up.
Yeah, he's been in limbo. He gives a thumbs up to Sean. Oh, and we forgot with the line that I said earlier. They kick Dracula.
They kick the Wolfman.
They kick the Wolfman in the nether regions. And they say, Wolfman's got nards.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Frankenstein's monster lets go of Phoebe's hand. Phoebe's like, please stay. And then gives him her stuffed animal, as Steve said, to remember her by. And then the army shows up.
Yeah, the army shows up because the little boy with the dog, who we very rarely saw, Eugene, wrote a letter to the army saying, monsters, send help.
So they did.
And they apparently took it seriously. And were like, yeah, all right, where are these monsters
They were
at?
like, the kid with the little dog, we got to protect him. They don't really understand the situation. And Sean comes forward and he's like, don't worry, we took care of it. And he gives him a business card that says monsters.
Yeah, he goes, who are you kids? And he goes, we're the Monster Squad. Yep. And I use that line very, very many times.
Oh. Oh my goodness. So that's basically the movie. They had a thing about the movie called Wolfman's Got Nards in 2018.
Okay.
They kind of, some of the people had passed by that point, but some of them had not. And so the remaining people got together and did like a documentary about movies of that type. Right? But otherwise, how was the film received?
So you kind of mentioned that it wasn't a box office hit.
It wasn't.
Even though the film was a financial failure, and its initial release, though, it subsequently developed a cult following. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's got a 62%, which is better than half, and not bad for the amount of people that know it. It's got a 5.88 on Metacritic. And Metacritic does like little reviews, and they said a fun 80s adventure with a slightly scary twist.
Yeah.
Which is not bad. Kevin Thomas of the LA Times said that it's fun for the kid in all of us.
Having seen it as an adult, I kind of feel that that's true.
Yeah, and then the New York Times called it a feature-length commercial for a joke store that sells not great rubber monster masks.
See, I don't get that because I actually feel like, I forgot to say in this fun fact that the guy who played the Gill Man, the creature from the Black Lagoon for all intents and purposes, he had that costume that he had made for himself. He was a special effects artist. And so he's, the costume creator is the one who played the character.
Yes.
Because it fit him perfectly.
The other piece to this, too, is you kind of mentioned already, but before, in 2010, the Alamo Drafthouse in Texas ran 2 screenings of the Monster Squad, and they were sold out.
Oh, okay.
So it was like a debut thing. It was like a big thing for it. It was a limited edition poster. And then also in 2018, as you mentioned, there was a documentary called Wolfman's Got Nards, exploring the film's influence over 30 years, basically, that had been out. They had a remake that was supposed to happen, and it got canceled.
Oh.
And so...
Would they have set that in the 80s as well, or would that have been set today? Maybe you don't know.
I don't know. It was supposed... They started talking about it in 2008.
Oh, okay.
And so they probably would have tried to make it more updated, but then it ended up falling through, as some things do. But
I want them to remake this, and I want the original opening. With the Zeppelins and the machine guns and all that.
So that was kind of how it was received.
It also, just to add to that, it won some awards too.
Okay.
They won the Young Artist Award for the ensemble, the kids.
Oh, okay.
And then also the kid who played Sean, John Andre Gower, he won a Saturn Award for Best Performance by a Younger Actor.
Nice.
So the Saturn Awards, if you don't know, are for sci-fi fantasy stuff. Yep. Yeah. So it had some good reception, even though it didn't do great at the box office.
So what did you think?
I really enjoyed this movie a lot. And it surprised me that I had never seen it because it was so good. Mm-hmm. And it did remind me of Goonies a little bit Stand By Me, although obviously not as serious as that one.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. This is something that, had they taken a little bit of the swearing and stuff out, that I could have seen as an early Steven Spielberg, Robert Zemeckis kind of movie. So it's really surprising to me that it didn't get the play of some of those other films. Because it has the feel of like that 80s family movie where kids could enjoy it, adults could enjoy it, like Back to the Future, those kind of things. Like
right.
It's that kind of feel. So I mean, it's not like I can't give it a 10. It's not like my super, super favorite. Mm-hmm. But I have to say that I had to look up a lot of things about it later because I just stopped taking notes and just wanted to enjoy the movie. Right. Especially since it was the first time I was seeing it. So I'm going to go with an 8. Solid 8.
Okay.
Highly recommended for people who haven't seen it before. Right. How about yourself?
Well, obviously, this was influential in my life.
Definitely.
I mean, this is like a documentary of how my childhood was in the Monster Squad. But, I mean, there was a few things about it. I'm going to say that's going to keep me from giving it a 10. Mm-hmm. There's a few things about it now as an adult looking at it. I did enjoy it. It was a bit campy. It was a bit campier than I remembered. Mm-hmm. But that's okay. I think it still was a good story, and I think it was something I'd watch again. I mean, I thought it was a decent movie, and it does hold a lot of nostalgia. So I'm going to go with an 8 as well. Okay. I enjoyed the campiness. Yeah, I know you do. You like campy. Yeah, it's like nostalgic campy. It's not like, corny campy. All right, so... Yeah. 8 amulets out of 10. I almost said out of 8. I never do that correctly. 8 amulets out of 10. Wow. So, we're a little bit behind on our schedule just because we had some life stuff come up. And because of that, we decided to switch things up a little bit for November and December. We're coming into the holiday season. So... Steve and I decided that we would do Thanksgiving-themed episodes of a couple TV shows. Yes. So my pick is a show that I have been wanting to do for a while, and that is Small Wonder. Okay. Small Wonder, if you don't know, is about, it's a sitcom with a family with a robot daughter. I did not know that. I'm going to tell you right now, I don't think it's going to hold up, but we'll see. I was obsessed with it. We'll talk about it. Okay. So, we do have a very quick What is Steve willing to watch? Then we'll talk about your pick. Okay. So, we're going to watch the Thanksgiving Story. Yes. Which is season 2, episode 12. But we have a couple other ones. This show can really only be found on YouTube, as far as I know. So, episode 1... Season 1, so the pilot, Vicky's Homecoming. Episode 12, Ted's New Boss. Or Season 4, Episode 7, The Sheik, which just looking from the picture on it looks like it might be kind of racist. I'm going to go with the first one. The pilot. Yeah. Vicky's Homecoming. Okay, great. So, Steve is willing to watch the pilot of Small Wonder. He was not willing to watch my first pick, which was Friends. No, I can't do it. At some point, we'll watch Friends, and maybe I'll watch Friends with a different friend and not Steve. Because Friends was known for their Thanksgiving episodes. But I think it'll be fun to revisit Small Wonder. We've got the Thanksgiving episode. We'll watch the pilot. And then what was your pick for your Thanksgiving show? Silver Spoons. Interesting. Yeah. I remember Silver Spoons as a kid. It was being on and watching it, I want to say in the evening time, around dinner time. And so, and that has a Thanksgiving episode as well. It actually has a 2-parter.
Yes.
And so instead of doing Thanksgiving episode and another episode, we're just going to do the 2 parts to the Thanksgiving episode.
Only thing I remember about that show is that they were wealthy and he had a train.
Yeah, Ricky Schroeder.
Yes.
And
now, Jason
later on, Rick Schroeder.
Yeah. He got serious.
And Alfonso Rivera, right?
Yeah, who later did Fresh Prince and then one of my favorite shows, Unwrapped.
Right. Yep, definitely.
And Jason Bateman.
Yep. So there was a good star cast to it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was really good. And basically, if you haven't seen it before, it's Ricky Schroeder and his dad are wealthy.
Yeah. They're born with a silver spoon.
Yeah. And then the other 2 play his friends. And, they're always getting into normal teenage hijinks, kind of adolescent.
Yeah,
I think
pre-teen.
they're like 13, 12, 13.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that we're going to watch that.
Yeah, so it'll be some fun 80s nostalgia, and we'll look at Thanksgiving, and we'll talk about our Thanksgiving memories. And then we're going to do Charlie Brown Thanksgiving for our Thanksgiving special.
Yeah.
Which should actually come out on Thanksgiving. I'm sure all of you will have plenty of time to listen.
Yeah.
Listen while you're basting your turkey.
Yeah, put the turkey in the oven and then listen to Stop Ruining My Childhood.
Yeah, forget the Macy's Day Parade.
Yeah, heck, Macy's Parade is old school. You want to be entertained by us.
We were between that and Mouse on the Mayflower, which I enjoyed, but it is it's older. It's more from the 60s, even though they played it all the time.
Yeah.
So we're going to do Charlie Brown Thanksgiving, and then a little bit after that, coming up soon, this is episode 45, and coming up soon, we have our 50th episode, and we're going to have a really fun game, we're going to have a guest, we're going to have a few different foods to munch on and try, and we just figured out what food we're going to eat.
Yes, our 50th episode extravaganza.
Yeah, so it should be a lot of fun, and we look forward to seeing you guys then. In the meantime, have a great week, everybody. Bye.
Bye.